The message arrived on a Tuesday morning, crackling through the deep space communication arrays that ringed Earth like a crown of steel and silicon. Communications officer Sarah Chen nearly spilled her coffee when the translation protocols kicked in, converting the alien transmission into readable text. "Admiral Martinez, you need to see this," she called across the command deck of Titan Station, humanity's primary defense platform orbiting Earth. The massive structure hummed with activity as thousands of personnel went about their daily routines, maintaining the fleet of warships that protected human space. Admiral Carlos Martinez strode over, his weathered face showing the strain of 40 years in space. He'd seen humanity rise from a single-world species to masters of 12 star systems. But the expression on Chen's face told him this was different. "What do we have, Officer Chen?" "It's a distress call, sir. But not from any human colony." She paused, her fingers dancing over the holographic display. "It's from the Zilani Confederation." The Admiral's eyebrows shot up. The Zilani were one of the most advanced species in the galaxy, their crystal cities and bioships the stuff of legend. They'd made contact with humanity 50 years ago, but had always maintained a polite distance. They were peaceful, philosophical beings who viewed warfare as barbaric. In their eyes, humans were crude newcomers who solved problems with violence. "Put it through," Martinez ordered. The hologram shimmered to life, revealing a Zilani female. Her translucent blue skin was pale with fear, and her large, silver eyes held a desperation that chilled the room. The Zilani were known for their emotional control, but this one was clearly terrified. "To any who receive this message," she began, her voice melodic even through the universal translator. "I am High Counselor Velatar of the Zilani Confederation. Our worlds are under attack by the destruction fleet of the Vorthak Empire. They have already consumed 3 of our 7 worlds. Our defenses have failed. Our people are dying." The image flickered, and the sound of explosions could be heard in the background. Velatar looked directly into the camera, her pride clearly warring with necessity. "We request aid from any who would help us. We know we have not always been welcoming to other species, but our children are dying. Please, if there is any mercy in the galaxy, help us." The transmission ended, leaving the command deck in stunned silence. Martinez felt every eye on the bridge turn to him. The Vorthak Empire was a name that made hardened Marines wake up screaming. They were a race of cybernetic monsters who consumed entire worlds, turning the biomass into fuel for their ever-expanding fleet. They'd wiped out a dozen species in the past century, and no one had been able to stop them. "Sir," Chen said quietly. The message was broadcast on all frequencies. "Every major species in the galaxy will have received it." Martinez nodded grimly. He knew what that meant. The Zilani had swallowed their pride and begged for help from everyone, including the barbaric humans they'd always looked down upon. "Get me a direct line to Earth Command," he ordered. "Priority Alpha." Within minutes, Admiral Martinez found himself in a holo conference with the highest levels of human military leadership. Fleet Admiral Harrison, the stern woman who commanded humanity's entire space navy, appeared as a blue-tinted hologram alongside a dozen other senior officers. "You've all seen the transmission," Harrison began without preamble. "The Zilani are asking for our help. The question is, do we give it?" "With respect, Admiral," spoke up General Morrison from Luna Base. "The Zilani have never helped us. When the hegemony attacked our colonies in the Outer Rim, they refused to even acknowledge our requests for assistance, said it wasn't their problem." "The Vorthak are different," Martinez interjected. "If they finish consuming the Zilani worlds, they'll have enough resources to threaten human space. This isn't just about helping the Zilani anymore." Admiral Harrison nodded slowly. "Intelligence reports suggest the Vorthak fleet is massive. 300 dreadnoughts, maybe more. Their ships are biomechanical hybrids that can repair themselves in battle. What forces do we have available?" "The Third Fleet is conducting training exercises in the Centauri system," reported Admiral Kim. 48 ships, including 12 dreadnoughts. The 7th Fleet is patrolling the Rim, another 30 vessels. If we pulled ships from other sectors— "No," Harrison's voice was firm. We can't leave our own colonies defenseless. Martinez, take the Third Fleet to Zalani space. You'll have full tactical autonomy. Martinez felt the weight of command settle on his shoulders. 48 ships against 300. The odds were impossible. But he'd learned long ago that humans had a talent for doing the impossible. What about the other species? Asked General Morrison. Surely some of them will respond to the distress call. Harrison's expression turned grim. Early intelligence suggests most are deliberating or claim they're too far away to help in time. The Korvaxi Empire has closed their borders entirely. The High Republic is offering to accept Zalani refugees, but no military assistance. The implications hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Once again, humanity would stand alone. How long do we have? Martinez asked. Best estimates put the Vorthak 3 days from the Zalani capital world of Kethvar. That's where most of their population is concentrated, if that falls. Harrison didn't need to finish the sentence. After the conference ended, Martinez stood alone on the observation deck of Titan Station, looking out at the blue marble of Earth. Somewhere out there, an entire species was facing extinction, and humanity was their only hope. The irony wasn't lost on him. The same species that had called humans barbaric was now depending on that very barbarism to save them. Admiral? Chen had approached quietly. The Third Fleet is ready to depart. Captain Williams is requesting final orders. Martinez turned from the viewport. Signal all ships. We depart for Zalani space immediately. Full combat load, no restrictions on weapons. As he watched the sleek forms of human dreadnoughts power up their engines, Martinez couldn't help but think about the last conversation he'd had with a Zalani diplomat. The elegant being had lectured him about humanity's primitive reliance on violence and suggested they should evolve beyond such crude methods. Let's see how primitive we really are, Martinez muttered as the fleet jumped into hyperspace. The journey to Zalani space took 18 hours at maximum burn. During the trip, Martinez studied every piece of intelligence they had on the Vorthak. The reports made for grim reading. Ship after ship, world after world, the Vorthak consumed everything in their path. They turned entire populations into biological resources, their dead worlds left as barren husks. But Martinez noticed something in the tactical reports. The Vorthak were used to fighting defensive actions. Their enemies typically tried to protect their worlds, fighting desperately to save what they could. It was a losing strategy against an enemy that could simply overwhelm through numbers. Captain Williams, Martinez called to the commander of the flagship, Indomitable. Signal all ships. We're not fighting a defensive action. Sir, the Zalani are trying to protect their worlds. That's exactly what the Vorthak expect. We're going to do something different. When the Third Fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Zalani space, they were greeted by a sight that would haunt them forever. The fourth world, Telahim, was a glowing ember in space. What had once been a garden world of crystal cities was now a molten ball of slag. The Vorthak bioships swarmed around it like locusts, harvesting the last of the planetary matter. "Sweet Mother of God," whispered someone on the bridge. Martinez's jaw tightened. The Vorthak ships were even more horrifying up close. Each vessel was a twisted fusion of metal and flesh, covered in organic armor that pulsed with alien life. They ranged in size from frigate-class hunters to massive dreadnoughts that looked like cybernetic whales. Tactical. What's their disposition? The main fleet appears to be concentrated around Telahim, sir. Estimated 200 ships. Another group is moving toward the fifth world. We're detecting massive energy signatures from their harvest operations. Martinez studied the tactical display. The Vorthak were spread out, focused on their feeding frenzy. They weren't expecting an attack from outside. All ships, prepare for combat. We're going in fast and hard. Target their harvest operations first, then their escort vessels. Remember, we're not here to trade shots with their main fleet. We hit them where it hurts, and keep moving. The human dreadnoughts accelerated toward the Vorthak swarm like avenging angels. The lead ship, Indomitable, was a kilometer-long beast bristling with railguns, plasma cannons, and missile tubes. Her sister ships followed in perfect formation, their black hulls absorbing the light of dying worlds. The first Vorthok picket ship died without even knowing humans were in the system. A spread of antimatter torpedoes turned it into expanding plasma before it could transmit a warning. The second picket lasted long enough to scream a warning across the alien communication networks before human railgun rounds shredded its bio-armor. "Incoming transmission from the Vorthak fleet," reported the communications officer. "Put it through," Martinez ordered. The hologram that appeared was a nightmare made flesh. The Vorthak commander was a fusion of organic tissue and mechanical implants. Its face a mass of writhing tentacles surrounding glowing red optical sensors. When it spoke, the words came out as a synthesized growl. "Unknown vessels, you enter the feeding grounds of the Vorthak Empire. Withdraw or be consumed." Martinez stepped forward, his human face hard as granite. "This is Admiral Martinez of the Human Third Fleet. The only thing being consumed today is your ships." The alien commander's optical sensors flared brighter. "Humans, we remember your species. You taste of iron and rage. Your worlds will burn beautifully. You're welcome to try," Martinez replied coldly. "But first, you'll have to get through us." The transmission ended, and space erupted into violence. The Vorthak fleet turned to meet this new threat, their bioships moving with predatory grace, but they had never faced anything like human military doctrine. The human ships didn't close for traditional combat. Instead, they used their superior speed and long-range weapons to conduct hit-and-run attacks. Railgun rounds traveling at significant fractions of light speed punched through Vorthak bioarmor like it was paper. Plasma cannons heated alien flesh until it boiled away in the vacuum. But the real shock came when the humans deployed their specialty weapons. Humanity had developed their military technology with one goal in mind: killing things efficiently. Where other species might hesitate at weapons of mass destruction, humans had embraced them as tools of war. "Deploy the Hellfire missiles," Martinez ordered. From the missile tubes of every human ship, sleek black weapons emerged. These weren't conventional explosives. They were weaponized fusion reactors, designed to create miniature stars in the heart of enemy vessels. As the Vorthak bioships closed in, expecting standard energy weapon exchanges, the Hellfire missiles struck home. The results were spectacular. Vorthak Dreadnoughts, massive creatures that had consumed worlds, were vaporized in fusion fire. Their bio-armor, evolved to resist conventional weapons, was utterly helpless against the raw fury of stellar nucleosynthesis. "My God," breathed Captain Williams. "Look at them burn." But Martinez wasn't watching the enemy die. He was watching their formation, their tactics. The Vorthak were good at overwhelming weaker opponents, but they had no answer for human aggression. They were like sharks suddenly finding themselves facing tigers. "Signal all ships," Martinez commanded. "Form up for attack pattern Omega. We're going after their command ship." The human fleet reformed into a spearhead formation, driving straight for the heart of the Vorthak fleet. The enemy responded with a wall of bioplasma and kinetic projectiles, but human point defense systems were designed by a species that had learned warfare the hard way. Automated turrets tracked and destroyed incoming threats with mechanical precision. The Vorthak command ship was a monstrosity 2 kilometers long, its hull covered in sensory organs and communication arrays. It coordinated the entire feeding operation, directing the lesser ships in their harvest of Telehim. "Target that command ship," Martinez ordered. "All weapons, full spread." What followed was the most concentrated firepower display in human military history. 12 dreadnoughts opened fire simultaneously, their combined weapons capable of cracking planets. The Vorthak command ship's bio-armor held for perhaps 3 seconds before nuclear fire consumed it entirely. With their command structure destroyed, the Vorthak fleet began to fall apart. Individual ships fought desperately, but they had lost their coordination. Human vessels picked them off systematically, using superior tactics and firepower to devastating effect. But Martinez wasn't done. As the last Vorthak ship around Telehim died in fusion fire, he was already planning the next phase of the operation. "Captain Williams, signal the fleet." We're moving to intercept the advance force heading for the Fifth World. End 1. Sir, shouldn't we contact the Zalani? Let them know we're here? Martinez considered this for a moment, then shook his head. Not yet. I want to see what these Vorthak are really made of when they're not feeding on helpless civilians. The human fleet vanished into hyperspace, leaving behind the burning wreckage of a Vorthak harvest fleet. In the space of 2 hours, humanity had announced its presence in Zalani space with the kind of violence that would be remembered for 1,000 years. On the distant world of Kethvar, High Counselor Velatar received the first reports with disbelief. An unknown fleet had attacked the Vorthak forces at Telahim and completely destroyed them. The attackers had identified themselves as human, but that seemed impossible. Humans were crude barbarians who barely controlled a dozen worlds. As she watched the tactical displays showing the utter annihilation of a 200-ship Vorthak fleet, Velatar began to understand that perhaps the Zalani had badly misjudged their human neighbors. In the depths of space, Admiral Martinez stood on the bridge of Indomitable and watched the tactical display with grim satisfaction. The Vorthak had made a critical error. They had threatened humanity's neighbors, and humans took a very dim view of that kind of behavior. Admiral, called the communications officer. We're receiving a transmission from the Zalani capital. They're asking if we're really human. Martinez smiled grimly. Tell them yes, and tell them we're just getting started. The human fleet materialized at the edge of the Nethara system, like predators emerging from darkness. The fifth world of the Zalani Confederation hung before them, a beautiful blue and green marble that reminded Admiral Martinez of Earth. But between the human ships and that peaceful world moved a sight that made even veteran spacers curse in horror. The Vorthak Advance Fleet was in the process of deploying their planetary consumption apparatus. Massive bioships, the size of small moons, had arranged themselves in a perfect sphere around Nethara, their organic hulls pulsing with malevolent life. From each ship, writhing tendrils reached down toward the planet's surface like the arms of a cosmic octopus. Tactical analysis, Martinez ordered, his voice tight with controlled anger. 127 vessels, sir. 12 super-heavy consumption ships, 45 dreadnoughts. The rest are escorts and harvesters. They've begun atmospheric extraction procedures. On the main screen, Martinez could see the horrific process beginning. The Vorthak tendrils were literally sucking the atmosphere from Nethara, creating massive storms visible from space. Lightning crackled across continents as the planet's weather systems collapsed under the artificial pressure changes. Sir, reported the communications officer, we're receiving multiple transmissions from the planet's surface. Emergency broadcasts in Zalani. Translation? Civilians crying for help, sir. Approximately 2 billion Zalani on that world. The atmospheric extraction will kill them all within hours. Martinez felt cold rage settle in his chest. The Vorthak weren't just conquering worlds. They were murdering entire populations for convenience. He'd seen the aftermath of their consumption process on Telahim. Nothing remained but molten slag. Signal all ships, battle stations. We're going to cut off those tendrils. Captain Williams looked up from her tactical station. Sir, the formation they're using is defensive. If we attack the consumption ships, the dreadnoughts will envelope us. We'll be outnumbered 3-1. Good, Martinez replied grimly. That means they'll all be bunched up together when we hit them. The human fleet accelerated toward the Vorthak sphere formation, their black hulls cutting through space like knives. But instead of heading for the escort ships, Martinez ordered a direct course for the consumption vessels. Admiral, Williams said urgently, if we attack the super heavies first, we'll be in the crossfire of their entire fleet. Captain, how many people die if we spend an hour fighting through their escorts first? Williams ran the calculations in her head and paled. At current extraction rates, approximately 50 million, then we go through them, not around them. The first Vorthak vessel to die was a harvester ship that had the misfortune to be positioned between the humans and their target. A spread of antimatter torpedoes turned it into an expanding cloud of superhot plasma. The second ship lasted long enough to return fire before human railguns turned its bioarmor into shredded meat. But the real shock came when the humans reached the consumption ships. Instead of the expected exchange of long-range fire, The human vessels did something that violated every principle of space warfare known to the Vorthak. They rammed. The Dreadnought, Righteous Fury, her forward armor reinforced with collapsed matter, struck the first consumption ship at nearly 40% of light speed. The impact released more energy than a stellar flare. Both ships vanished in a ball of nuclear fire that lit up the entire system. Righteous Fury, report, Martinez called out. Escape pods away, sir, came the reply from Captain Jackson's hoarse voice. Ship's gone, but we took that bastard with us. The Vorthak fleet recoiled in shock and horror. In their entire history, no species had ever deliberately sacrificed dreadnoughts in ramming attacks. The very concept was alien to their consumption-based mentality. But Martinez wasn't done. As the remaining Vorthak super heavies tried to reform their defensive sphere, human ships darted between them like wolves among sheep. Where a consumption ship's tendril met the human vessels, the result was always the same. The organic cables were severed by precision, plasma, fire, releasing the stolen atmosphere back to Nethara's gravity well. Consumption Ship 7 is breaking off, reported the tactical officer. Martinez watched as the massive bioship tried to retreat, its feeding tendrils writhing in apparent pain where they had been severed. The sight of the wounded alien vessel filled him with savage satisfaction. Pursue and destroy. No Vorthak leaves this system alive. The chase that followed would be studied in military academies for centuries. The fleeing consumption ship was 3 times the size of the largest human dreadnought, its bioarmor capable of regenerating battle damage, but it had never faced human determination. The Indomitable caught up with the fleeing monster near Nethara's third moon. What happened next defied every principle of rational space warfare. Instead of maintaining safe firing distances, Martinez ordered his ship to match course and speed with the alien vessel, running alongside it like an ancient naval battle. All weapons, continuous fire, target their vital systems. The space between the two ships became a hellish light show of plasma beams and railgun rounds. The Vorthak vessel's bioarmor bubbled and burned, but its regeneration systems struggled to keep pace with the damage. Meanwhile, the Indomitable's ablative armor plates glowed cherry red as alien weapons tried to find vulnerable points. Hull breach on decks 7 through 12, reported the damage control officer. Seal them off and keep firing, Martinez ordered. The battle might have continued for hours, but the Indomitable's chief engineer had an idea that was either brilliant or completely insane. Chief Petty Officer Sarah Kim had noticed that the Vorthak ship's bioarmor was actually living tissue, complete with a circulatory system. Captain Williams, she called over the battle communications, request permission to deploy chemical warfare protocols. Williams' eyes widened. Chemical warfare had been banned among civilized species for millennia. But the Vorthak weren't exactly civilized. What do you have in mind, Chief? Their armor is organic. I can synthesize a contact poison that will interfere with their regeneration. It won't kill them, ATS, but it'll stop them from healing. Martinez didn't hesitate. Do it. Within minutes, the Indomitable's manufacturing bays were producing chemical weapons designed to kill living tissue. The delivery system was equally crude and effective. Modified torpedo warheads filled with industrial-strength contact poison. When the chemical torpedoes struck the Vorthak consumption ship, the effect was immediate and horrifying. The living armor began to dissolve, revealing the mechanical systems beneath. The alien vessel's regeneration stopped entirely, leaving it vulnerable to conventional weapons. All ships, target the exposed sections. The combined firepower of the human fleet concentrated on the wounded consumption ship. Plasma cannons burned through exposed biomechanical systems, while railgun rounds shattered critical components. Within minutes, the massive alien vessel was drifting dead in space, but the victory came at a cost. The Vorthak dreadnoughts had finally organized themselves for a counterattack. Martinez found his fleet surrounded by angry aliens who were no longer underestimating human capabilities. Admiral, Williams reported grimly, we're outnumbered 4-1. And we've expended 60% of our ammunition. Martinez studied the tactical display. The remaining Vorthak ships had formed a hunting formation, using their superior numbers to gradually close the net around the human fleet. It was a sound tactical decision that would normally guarantee victory, But Martinez had spent his entire career learning how to fight impossible odds. Humanity had never been the strongest or most advanced species in the galaxy, but they had developed a talent for winning through sheer, bloody-minded determination. "Signal all ships," he ordered. "Implement Battle Plan Thermopylae." Williams looked at him with something approaching awe. Battle Plan Thermopylae was theoretical doctrine that had never been tested in combat. It was based on an ancient Earth battle, where a small force had held off a massive army by using terrain advantages and superior tactics. "Sir, Thermopylae requires a choke point. We're in open space. Then we make one." Martinez ordered his ships to take position near a cluster of asteroids that orbited Nethara's primary moon. The rocks weren't large enough to hide behind, but they would serve another purpose entirely. "Deploy all remaining nuclear mines," Martinez commanded. "I want those asteroids turned into a kill zone." The human ships scattered their remaining mine arsenal throughout the asteroid field, creating an invisible web of death. Each mine was equipped with proximity sensors and enough nuclear fury to vaporize a frigate. When the Vorthak fleet moved in for the final attack, they flew straight into the trap. The first bio-ship to enter the asteroid field triggered a chain reaction that turned the entire area into a miniature supernova. 15 Vorthak vessels died in the initial detonation, and the survivors found themselves flying through a field of radioactive debris. But the real genius of the plan wasn't the mines. It was what happened next. "All ships, emergency acceleration, exit the system." The human fleet burst from the asteroid field at maximum burn, leaving behind the confused and partially blinded Vorthak survivors. To the aliens, it looked like the humans were retreating in panic. They were wrong. Martinez had ordered his ships to a specific coordinate in deep space, where they turned around and prepared for the most audacious maneuver in human military history. Navigation. Plot a course directly through the Vorthak formation. Maximum velocity. "Sir," the navigator protested, "at that speed, we won't be able to maneuver. If they concentrate fire on us, they won't have time," Martinez replied with cold confidence. The human fleet accelerated to nearly 80% of light speed, their engines pushed far beyond safe limits. They had become relativistic projectiles, too fast for the Vorthak point defenses to track effectively. The aliens had perhaps 10 seconds to react before the human ships tore through their formation like bullets through paper. At those speeds, even near misses were lethal. The relativistic wake from human engines shredded Vorthak bioarmor and overloaded their organic systems. When the humans finally decelerated, they had cut the alien fleet in half. More importantly, they had destroyed the command structure that held the Vorthak formation together. "Damage report," Martinez called out. "Multiple hull breaches, sir. Engines operating at 40% efficiency, but we're still combat capable." Martinez looked at the tactical display and smiled grimly. The Vorthak had started the battle with over 100 ships. Now fewer than 30 remained, and those were scattered and disorganized. "Signal all ships, form hunting packs and finish them off." What followed was less a battle than an execution. Human vessels, working in coordinated groups, systematically hunted down the surviving Vorthak ships. The aliens fought desperately, but their consumption-based tactics were useless against opponents who simply refused to be consumed. The last Vorthak ship died as the sun rose over Nethara's eastern continents. Admiral Martinez stood on the bridge of his battered flagship and watched the alien vessel burn in space. Around him, his crew worked to repair battle damage and tend to the wounded. "Admiral," the communications officer reported, "we're receiving a transmission from Nethara's surface." The holographic image that appeared showed a Zalani male, his translucent blue skin marked with the ritual scars of a planetary governor. His large silver eyes were wide with something between gratitude and disbelief. "Human vessels, this is Governor Kethnal of Nethara. We watched the battle from our surface observatories. You saved 2 billion lives today," Martinez nodded wearily. "Governor, what's the status of your world's defenses? Our orbital platforms were destroyed in the initial attack. We have no military vessels capable of space combat. If the Vorthak return, they won't," Martinez said with absolute certainty. "At least, not to this system." How many consumption fleets do the Vorthak have? The Zalani governor's expression darkened. Intelligence suggests at least 3 more, each larger than the force you just destroyed. They are converging on our capital world of Kethvar. Our remaining military forces are making their final stand there. Martinez felt exhaustion weigh down on him like a physical burden. His fleet was battered, low on ammunition, and facing an enemy that still outnumbered them 10-1. Any sane military commander would withdraw and request reinforcements, but Martinez had never been accused of sanity. Governor, we'll need supplies and repairs. Can your world provide them? Of course. Anything you require. But surely you don't mean to continue the fight? Your ships are damaged, your crew's exhausted. Martinez looked out at the debris field that had once been a Vorthak consumption fleet. Human ships moved among the wreckage, searching for survivors and salvageable technology. His people had just accomplished the impossible, and they were already preparing to do it again. Governor, you called for help, and we answered. The job isn't finished until every Vorthak in your space is dead. As repair shuttles from Nethara rose to meet the human fleet, Martinez allowed himself a moment of quiet satisfaction. The Zalani had called humans barbaric, primitive, violent. They had looked down on humanity as crude newcomers who solved problems with force. They were right, of course. Humans were violent. They did solve problems with force. But sometimes, violence was exactly what the situation required. Captain Williams, Martinez called out. Yes, sir. Signal Earth Command. Request immediate reinforcements. Tell them we're going to need every ship we can get. Sir, even if they send everything, we'll still be outnumbered. Martinez smiled grimly as he watched the first repair shuttles dock with his damaged ships. Captain, when has that ever stopped us before? In the depths of space, the human fleet began the long process of healing its wounds and preparing for the next battle. They had saved one world, but 3 more Vorthak fleets were converging on the Zalani capital. The real test was yet to come. On distant Earth, Fleet Admiral Harrison received Martinez's request for reinforcements and felt her blood run cold. She was being asked to commit every available human warship to a battle they couldn't possibly win. It violated every principle of strategic doctrine. She approved the request within minutes. After all, that's what humans did. They stood up to impossible odds and dared the universe to do its worst. Sometimes, they lost. But when they won, they changed the galaxy forever. The word went out across human space, come to war. The Vorthak had made the mistake of threatening humanity's neighbors, and that simply could not be allowed to stand. From a dozen worlds, human warships began their journey to Zalani space. They carried with them the fury of a species that had learned to thrive on conflict, and the determination of a people who had never learned how to surrender. The Vorthak Empire was about to discover why humans were feared across the galaxy, even by those who called them friends. The human reinforcement fleet arrived at the edge of Zalani space, like a storm front made of steel and nuclear fire. Admiral Martinez watched from the bridge of his repaired flagship as ship after ship dropped out of hyperspace, their running lights creating a constellation of human determination in the darkness. 147 vessels answered Earth's call. Every available dreadnought, cruiser, and destroyer had been stripped from patrol duties across human space. The colonial militias had contributed their heaviest ships. Even the merchant marine had volunteered their armed cargo haulers for support duties. My God, whispered Captain Williams. They actually came. Martinez nodded, feeling a surge of pride that threatened to overwhelm his military composure. When humanity called, humanity answered. It didn't matter that the odds were impossible. It didn't matter that they were fighting to save a species that had always looked down on them. The call had gone out, and they had come. Signal from Fleet Admiral Harrison, reported the communications officer. She's requesting immediate conference with all senior commanders. The holographic projection of Admiral Harrison appeared in the Indomitable's conference room, flanked by the images of 30 other ship commanders. Her weathered face showed the strain of the past week, but her eyes burned with the same determination that had carried humanity from Earth to the stars. Ladies and gentlemen, She began without preamble. We're about to attempt something that every military academy in human space would call suicide. 3 Vorthak consumption fleets are converging on the Zilani capital world. Combined strength, over 800 vessels. A murmur ran through the assembled commanders. Even for humans, those odds were daunting. Intelligence reports suggest the Zilani home fleet was destroyed 6 hours ago. Harrison continued grimly. The planet's orbital defenses are failing. Best estimates give us 12 hours before the consumption process begins. Admiral Martinez leaned forward in his chair. Admiral, what's our tactical situation? Grim. Harrison replied honestly. The Vorthak have learned from their encounters with our forces. They're no longer spreading out for consumption operations. Instead, they're maintaining tight formations designed to overwhelm any relief force through sheer numbers. Captain Jackson of the Righteous Fury II spoke up. Ma'am, with respect, we've beaten impossible odds before. This is different, Captain. We're not talking about hit-and-run tactics or defensive actions. We need to break through 3 consumption fleets and establish orbital control over Kethvar. Then we need to hold that control long enough for the Zilani to evacuate their population. The silence that followed was heavy with understanding. They weren't just being asked to fight an impossible battle. They were being asked to win it decisively enough to save billions of lives. Admiral Martinez studied the tactical displays showing the Vorthak fleet positions. The aliens had positioned themselves in a triple-layer formation around Kethvar, creating overlapping fields of fire that would devastate any attacking force. It was solid defensive doctrine that should have been impregnable. Admiral Harrison, he said slowly, what if we don't try to break through them? Explain. The Vorthak are expecting us to attack their formations directly. They've prepared for that kind of battle. But what if we force them to come to us instead? Harrison's eyes narrowed with interest. Go on. Martinez activated the holographic star chart, highlighting several key positions around the Kethvar system. The Vorthak need to maintain their consumption formation to drain the planet effectively. If we threaten their supply lines and support vessels, they'll have to break formation to deal with us. Captain Williams caught on immediately. We hit their logistics network, force them to spread out to protect their support ships. Exactly. The Vorthak fleets are massive, but they're also dependent on a complex supply chain. They need ammunition ships, repair vessels, command and control platforms. If we eliminate those assets, their main fleets become sitting ducks, finished Admiral Harrison. It could work, but it would require perfect coordination and split-second timing. Martinez nodded. And it would require some of our ships to make suicidal runs against heavily defended targets. The silence stretched for long moments as each commander considered the implications. They were being asked to volunteer for missions that had little chance of survival. Captain Jackson was the first to speak. Count the Fury in, Admiral. My crew didn't come this far to turn back now. One by one, the other commanders voiced their agreement. Not a single ship requested to be assigned to the safer support roles. Every human vessel wanted to be in the thick of the fighting. Admiral Harrison's expression showed both pride and sorrow. Very well. Martinez, you'll coordinate the logistics strikes with the 3rd Fleet. I'll take the main body and engage their primary formations once they break up. Remember, people, we're not just fighting for the Zilani anymore. If the Vorthak finish consuming their space, human worlds will be next on the menu. The conference dissolved as commanders returned to their ships to brief their crews. Martinez remained alone in the conference room for a moment, staring at the tactical display. What they were about to attempt violated every principle of sound military doctrine. They were outnumbered 6-1, attacking prepared positions with insufficient firepower. It was exactly the kind of impossible situation that humans had been facing and overcoming for millennia. Admiral, Captain Williams had returned to find him still studying the display. The crew is ready. All ships report prepared for combat operations. Martinez nodded and stood. Then let's go save a species that thinks we're barbarians. The human fleet divided into smaller task forces, each targeting a different aspect of the Vorthak supply network. Martinez led 15 ships toward the alien fuel depot, a massive biomechanical structure that fed raw materials to the consumption fleets. Intelligence suggested it was defended by at least 40 vessels. Tactical analysis complete, reported the weapons officer. The depot is surrounded by overlapping defensive platforms, estimated firepower equivalent to 60 human dreadnoughts. Any weak points? The fuel storage sections are heavily armored but appear vulnerable to thermal weapons. If we could penetrate the outer defenses, we could turn the entire depot into a star, Martinez finished. How much antimatter do we have remaining? 12 torpedoes, sir. But at those ranges, delivery would be nearly impossible. Martinez smiled grimly. Not if we don't try to deliver them conventionally. What followed was perhaps the most audacious attack in human military history. Instead of launching their antimatter torpedoes from safe distances, the human ships accelerated directly toward the Vorthak depot at maximum velocity. At the last possible moment, they released their weapons and executed emergency turns that pushed their inertial dampeners beyond safe limits. The antimatter torpedoes continued on ballistic trajectories, striking the depot's fuel storage sections with the combined force of a dozen nuclear explosions. The resulting detonation was visible from 3 star systems away, as stored biomass underwent explosive conversion to energy. Depot destroyed, reported the tactical officer over the roar of alarms. But we've got incoming Vorthak response fleets. 47 vessels, converging on our position. Good, Martinez replied calmly. That means they're not protecting their consumption formations anymore. Across the HFY system, similar scenes played out as human task forces struck critical Vorthak infrastructure. Communication relays died in fusion fire. Supply convoys were intercepted and destroyed. Repair facilities were turned into expanding clouds of superheated plasma. The Vorthak response was exactly what Martinez had hoped for. Faced with attacks on their logistics network, the alien commanders began pulling ships away from their consumption formations to deal with the human raiders. The triple-layer defense around HFY started to develop gaps. Admiral Harrison to all ships, came the fleet-wide communication. Primary assault commencing. All units. Execute attack pattern Ragnarok. Through the viewports of human ships throughout the system, crews watched as the main human battle fleet accelerated toward the weakened Vorthak formations. 112 vessels, their black hulls bristling with weapons, charged directly into the teeth of the alien defenses. What happened next would be studied by military historians for centuries. The human fleet didn't try to break through the Vorthak lines cleanly. Instead, they deliberately entangled themselves in close-quarters combat, using their superior maneuverability and aggressive tactics to turn the battle into a massive brawl. Vorthak bioships, designed for long-range consumption operations, found themselves fighting knife fights with human dreadnoughts. The aliens' regenerative armor was useless against point-blank railgun fire. Their plasma weapons couldn't track the frantically maneuvering human vessels. Martinez, to all logistics strike forces, came the Admiral's voice over the communications network. Primary fleet is engaged. Execute Phase 2. Martinez's task force, bloodied but intact after their running battle with Vorthak response ships, turned toward HFY itself. Their mission was no longer destruction. It was rescue. The Zelani homeworld hung before them like a jewel under siege. The planet's crystal cities still gleamed in the light of the system's star, but the telltale signs of atmospheric extraction were visible as massive storms swirled across the continents. Signal from the planetary surface, reported the communications officer. The hologram that appeared showed High Counselor Velatar, the same Zelani female who had sent the original distress call. But now she was broadcasting from what appeared to be an underground bunker, her translucent blue skin pale with exhaustion. Human vessels, this is HFY Command. We cannot believe you came back. Our sensors show your fleet engaging the Vorthak formations. Counselor, Martinez replied. We need to begin immediate evacuation of your population centers. My ships can provide orbital fire support, but we can't hold the system indefinitely. Velatar's large silver eyes filled with something that looked like tears. Admiral Martinez, you don't understand. We have 2 billion people on this world. Even with every transport vessel in our space, evacuation would take weeks. Martinez felt cold certainty settle in his chest. There wasn't time for a gradual evacuation. The mathematics were simple and brutal. Counselor, how many people can you get off-world in the next 6 hours? Perhaps 50 million. But the rest will have to be defended here, Martinez finished. Counselor, I need you to listen very carefully. We're going to break the Vorthak siege, but we're going to need your help to hold the system afterward. Velatar looked confused. Admiral, our military is gone. We have no warships, no orbital defenses. What help could we possibly provide? Martinez smiled grimly. Counselor, you're about to learn why humans are considered the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Over the next hour, Martinez outlined a plan that would have been rejected as insane by any conventional military mind. The surviving Zilani population would be relocated to hardened underground shelters. The planet's industrial infrastructure would be converted to military production. Most importantly, the Zilani would learn to fight like humans. You want us to become warriors? Velatar asked, her voice filled with horror and fascination. I want you to become survivors, Martinez replied. The Vorthak will be back, probably with reinforcements. When they come, they need to find a world that can defend itself. The battle raging in space around Kethvar reached its crescendo as the human main fleet finally broke through the Vorthak inner defenses. Admiral Harrison's flagship, the Indomitable Will, led the charge directly toward the largest Vorthak consumption ship, a biomechanical monster the size of a small moon. All ships, target the primary consumption vessel, Harrison ordered. Pour everything we have into that thing. The concentrated firepower of 60 human dreadnoughts struck the alien behemoth like the fist of an angry god. Bioarmor that had resisted conventional weapons for hours began to crack and burn under the assault. The massive ship's regeneration systems overloaded as faster damage was inflicted than could be repaired. But the real shock came when the consumption ship began to die. As its biological systems failed, it released the stored biomass of 3 consumed worlds. The energy discharge was equivalent to a stellar flare, turning nearby Vorthak ships into instantly vaporized plasma. My God, whispered someone on the Indomitable Will's bridge. It's like watching a star go supernova. When the light finally faded, the Vorthak formation was in ruins. Of the 800 ships that had begun the siege, fewer than 200 remained. Those survivors were scattered, disorganized, and fleeing for the edge of the system. All ships, pursue and destroy, Admiral Harrison ordered coldly. No Vorthak leaves this system alive. The human fleet spread out in hunting formation, systematically tracking down and eliminating the fleeing alien vessels. It was less a battle than an execution. But Martinez felt no mercy for an enemy that consumed entire worlds. Admiral, Captain Williams reported, the last Vorthak vessel has been destroyed. The system is clear. Martinez nodded, but his expression remained grim. For now. But they'll be back, and next time they'll be ready for our tactics. Over the following weeks, the transformation of Zilani space began in earnest. Human military engineers worked alongside Zilani technicians to convert crystal cities into fortress cities. Orbital defense platforms were constructed using a hybrid of human weapons technology and Zilani crystalline engineering. Most importantly, the Zilani themselves began to change. The philosophical pacifists, who had looked down on human violence, began learning the harsh realities of military science. They studied human tactical manuals, practiced with human weapons, and slowly began to understand that sometimes violence was the only answer to violence. High Counselor Velatar stood in the command center of the new Kethvar defense grid, watching as her people drilled with plasma rifles and tactical armor. The sight would have horrified her ancestors, but she had seen what happened to worlds that couldn't defend themselves. Admiral Martinez, she said, as the human commander joined her at the observation window, I owe you an apology. For what, Counselor? For looking down on your species. For calling you barbarians and primitives. We were wrong. Martinez considered her words carefully. Counselor, you weren't wrong about humans being violent. We are. We solve problems with force, because that's what evolution taught us. But being violent doesn't make us evil, it makes us survivors. Velatar nodded slowly. And now, you're teaching us to be survivors, as well. 6 months later, when the next Vorthak fleet arrived in Zalani space, they found something they had never encountered before. The crystal cities of Kethvar had been transformed into military strongholds. The gentle Zalani had become fierce defenders of their worlds. And orbiting their capital like guardian angels, a combined fleet of human and Zalani warships waited with weapons-powered and targeting solutions locked. The Vorthak commander, a cybernetic horror who had consumed a dozen species, transmitted the usual demand for surrender. The response came not from Admiral Martinez or the human fleet, but from High Counselor Velatar herself. Vorthak vessels, this is the Zalani Defense Command. You are not welcome in our space. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences. The alien commander's optical sensors flared with what might have been surprise. Zalani, you were a peaceful species. You do not fight. You cannot resist. Velatar's response was calm, measured, and absolutely final. We learned from humanity that sometimes peace must be defended with force. We will not submit, we will not retreat, and we will not allow you to consume our worlds. The battle that followed was different from the desperate defense that had saved Kethvar. The Zalani fought with cold precision, their crystal-based weapons technology enhanced by human tactical doctrine. They had learned the most important lesson humanity could teach them: that strength without the will to use it was just weakness disguised. When the last Vorthak ship died in fusion fire, Admiral Martinez stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched as Zalani crews cheered their victory. The elegant, philosophical species that had once called humans barbaric now understood the terrible necessity of violence in an hostile universe. But more importantly, they had learned that there was a difference between being violent and being evil. Humans had shown them that strength could be used to protect the innocent, that weapons could preserve peace, and that sometimes the only way to save lives was to take them. The transformation of the Zalani Confederation sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy. Other species began to reconsider their relationship with humanity. The barbaric humans had not only answered a distress call from those who had rejected them, but had fundamentally changed the strategic balance of power in their region of space. Years later, when the Vorthak Empire finally collapsed under the combined assault of a dozen species who had learned to fight from human teachers, historians would mark the defense of Zalani space as the turning point in the war. It was the moment when the galaxy learned that humanity's greatest export wasn't technology or culture, but the willingness to stand and fight when others would surrender. Admiral Martinez, now elderly and gray-haired, stood in the memorial garden on Kethvar, where crystal monuments honored the human and Zalani dead. The gentle species that had once found violence abhorrent had built their memorial on a simple principle: that some things were worth fighting for, and that peace was meaningless unless you were willing to defend it. A young Zalani approached him, her translucent blue skin bearing the scars of military service. She wore the insignia of a fleet commander, and her large silver eyes held the hard wisdom of combat experience. "Admiral Martinez," she said formally, "I wanted to thank you for what humanity did for us." Martinez smiled and shook his head. "Commander, we didn't do anything for you. We did it with you. That's the difference." As the twin suns of Kethvar set behind the crystal spires of the rebuilt capital, Martinez reflected on the irony of it all. The Zalani had been right about humans being violent, aggressive, and quick to resort to force, but they had been wrong about what that meant. Violence wasn't something to be ashamed of. It was a tool, like any other. The measure of a species wasn't whether they could fight, but what they were willing to fight for. And humanity, despite all their flaws and barbarism, had always been willing to fight for those who couldn't fight for themselves. That was why they were feared across the galaxy. Not because they were violent, but because they were violent with purpose. In the end, that had made all the difference.